To begin with, Nick Wilson, 92.3 The Fan's Afternoon Drive. Nick, we can never have you on the show because you are on live on 92.3 The Fan when we're on, so we appreciate the time.
Well, I'm happy to be here, and my only clause in coming on is that it would be on during my own show, so that I would be competing against myself. And this is all about my ego today, and I thank you for letting me, do something in service of my own ego.
We can guarantee a win if you're competing against yourself.
Look at that.
There you go.
I'm already winning. I haven't opened any cards yet, and I've already won.
All right, let's begin. Let's talk about the Browns. So, big news, obviously, the Deshaun Watson trade. Didn't go well the last 6 games after the suspension last year. Let me ask you this. What would constitute a success for the Browns with the Deshaun Watson trade in your mind?
So it's a two-parter. The one, and probably most important, is Deshaun's play validating the trade. Last year, I probably liked his play over the course of those 6 games more than most. At no point did he look like a franchise quarterback. At no point did he look like a guy worth $230 million guaranteed. But I thought the last 3 games he really teased us with some playmaking ability. It wasn't enough for people, though. It wasn't enough for the greater Cleveland. So he's got to play like the guy he was in 2020. The other half of this is they've just got to get out of their own way and win games. I mean, it's that simple. You can, Deshaun could have 5,000 passing yards and 72 touchdowns if the Cleveland Browns aren't winning this year and just winning more than you're losing. Before we even get to the playoffs, get to 9-8, get to 10-7. That's really when we're going to be able to start to talk about the success of this deal. But I don't think just one thing can happen. I think it's got to be both, because it was the boldest and riskiest trade the Cleveland Browns have ever made since maybe going back to Paul Warfield for the number 1 pick that, or maybe even the trade that brought Bernie to town. That's the stakes. So if one does well but the other doesn't, it's not going to satiate the bloodlust for success in town that you have when you trade for a player on the scale and to the risk that is Deshaun Watson.
Do they have to get to a Super Bowl?
Yeah.
That's the move that, that's the kind of all-in move this was.
Yeah, I mean, I think the whole reason why you trade for a franchise quarterback is for the ability to not just contend for a Super Bowl, but to contend for multiple Super Bowls. Like that's the magic of Mahomes. It's not that Mahomes can flick his wrist and throw a 90-yard touchdown pass. It's that every year, like this was the rebuilding year. Kansas City was rebuilding this year. They won the Super Bowl. That's the Mahomes effect. And when you give up 3 firsts and multiple seconds and multiple thirds, $230 million, and you know what? Not that I'm trying to relitigate this in any way, but bringing a quarterback with the allegations and the lawsuits against Deshaun, yeah, the success is high. So winning a Super Bowl, that's the only way we could definitively declare this trade worked and it was worth it. There are other ways that, okay, you make a Super Bowl, maybe you make a couple AFC title games, but shut the door. The only way to really slam the door, at least 1 Super Bowl win.
The other thing that we touched on a little bit, the numbers for Watson the last 6 games were not good. Bottom of the barrel metric-wise for quarterbacks with a certain amount of snaps played. How much of that was, it was really Jacoby Brissett's offense, because it had to be because he played 11 games. How much of it was, man, this guy hasn't played in 3 years and he's in an offense that isn't his?
So I think it's equal parts that, and I think you have to throw in a dash of a guy who's got a new normal. And I just think, and I'll be honest with you guys, I was most wrong on the Deshaun Watson rust factor. Because I said, I don't care.
Yep, me too.
That's a him problem, that's a Browns problem. Now, in fairness, his struggles were not all his doing. It felt like the Browns, offensively, were just kind of throwing things at the wall to see what would stick. That's not how I would have preferred them. As a matter of fact, I came away feeling like it was more on the Browns than it was on Deshaun, specifically to the second half of those 6 games. The first 3 games, he just wasn't good. And he wasn't accurate, and he wasn't in rhythm, and he wasn't comfortable. The last 3 games, he was finding rhythm. The last 3 games, he was finding that explosive step that he has, and it felt like the Browns had already decided, well, we're not going to win, or we're not going to go to the playoffs, so let's just go ahead and send it out. And I got to be honest with you, I really don't like that. And the number one reason is you're in the midst of trying to sustain a winning culture. You had a leg to stand on. Yes, you were 4-7, but Jacoby and the Browns are trying to win every week. To then get to a point where you're still mathematically in it, and all right, well, we know what he did well in Houston, but we're going to go ahead and we're going to poke around. We're not going to run things out of the spread. We're not going to do this. We're not going to do that. It felt like, in a way, they failed him at the end of the season more so than Deshaun failed them. That can change real quick, though, in week 1 if he goes out and really just can't cut it.
Yeah, if they tailor an offense to him, which is what they should do, I think that cures a lot of what was going on those last 6 games. Now, as we get ready for the offseason program to begin, you hear Greg Newsome has switched agents. Now, he's come out and said he didn't demand a trade, but I don't know, that something there says he's not quite happy.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think a lot of people shouted down that report because we don't want it to be true. I mean, let's be honest. The Browns could not afford to trade Greg Newsome. Yep. Just in terms of the optics alone. You have 1 of 2 first-round picks Andrew Berry will have made going on year 4 in Cleveland. Greg's one of them. The other's Jed Wills. And the jury is way out on Jed Wills. So if you were to trade him for what would be less than the value, less than what he played up to last year, you'd be shooting yourself in the foot. You don't have, and listen, the cornerback room is the one room you could afford to make that trade from. But it's really tough to see them getting back that commensurate value. Now, I don't know that he asked for a trade. I think there was probably, he was moved halfway through the year into the slot because of the emergence of M.J. Emerson. I bet you that he got a little afraid that his long-term value was being attacked. That should be something that you can, speak to with the new defensive coordinator, but I think it bears watching. I think a lot of people just said, oh, well, he denied it, Schefter denied it, Mary Kay denied it, so it's over. I think this is a situation we should watch all the way into the season. And remember, just because they don't trade him before the draft or just before they don't trade him before the season, everything's fair game. And if he struggles or if he's a malcontent, I think this is one of the real key situations because that depth in that room is extraordinary.
Yeah, and again, you can alleviate some of that by saying, we value you, we're going to take care of you. But again, if I'm him, it's like, show me.
Well, and the tough thing is, since he's going to year 3, he can't get a contract extension for 11 months.
Yep.
So the easiest way to say, let's chill, let's go ahead, we're going to go ahead and we're handling this, is to pay a guy. We can't do that. So really, you got an 11-month clock here to prove it to Greg Newsome. And the good news is, he is a good kid. Like, this isn't what Elijah Moore did in New York, where they were winning and Elijah Moore asked for a trade. Greg Newsome's a really good kid. So I think it's going to work itself out. But if you're the Browns, you can't. If I'm Andrew Berry, I kind of got to stake, and Stefanski, I got to take stock. This is a kid that we drafted. He was a really great rookie. Last year was a mixed bag. But this is a kid who could be a starting outside corner in the NFL, which is one of the 4 hottest commodities you can have. How has this gotten here? And, organizations like to play the game. It's always on the player. No, I think Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski are smart enough to understand their role in this. And that's what I hope comes out.
Before I let you go, got about a minute. Jim Schwartz, how big of a difference does he make for this defense? And what do you expect the identity to be?
So I think it's huge, and mostly because I think all of a sudden you're going to see guys start to develop. The Browns have a lot of guys on this roster who are underdeveloped. And I actually think this is the perfect job for Schwartz because he's going to run the wide 9 zone defensive line, and that's going to be good for Miles. It's also going to be good for a bunch of part-time guys that they're treating as starters, young guys like Alex Wright. So I imagine that they're going to be able to get a lot of pressure this year. And with these cornerbacks, if you get the right amount of pressure, you're going to be able to get turnovers. So I think it was the perfect hire. I think he's going to be here long term, which allows you more stability. They were in a tough spot, coming off 2 straight losing seasons. I think they got as good of a defensive coordinator as you could, and that checks out good.